The day has finally come. We have access to Super Slam. It's Super Slam release day. And of course, with a new set comes a brand new meta. And the question on everybody's mind is, of course, what's the new hot thing? What's the best deck? What decks have risen to the top thanks to these brand new cards? And what decks are starting to kind of fall by the wayside? So today, I'm not going to do a full-on tier list unless you want that, in which case, let me know in a comment down below, and I will give you a 3-hour tier list.
What did he say?
You probably don't want that. Either way, let me know that in a comment below. But today I'm going to give you 5 heroes that you should have at the top of your list, at the top of the meta that you have to be prepared for. And trust me, these heroes are in no way, shape, or form based on my own biases. These are 100% the best heroes, and forget everything else you possibly could think I might be working into them. Starting, of course, from the top. And I will say this, I am not going to mince my words. I'm just going to tell you the heroes that I think are going to be sitting at the top of the tier list. And the first one is none other than Verdant's Thorn of the Rose. And you know what? I'll just chase it. Second, right behind her, is the other, yes, that's right, the other hero that is an Earth hero, and that is Florian Rotwood Harbinger. I think the 2 Earth heroes deserve their spot at the top of the heap. I think the early numbers show it. And I think because Earth has the capacity to stretch games out with access to some very good defense reactions, and because Earth has the capacity to play this really powerful end game as well as stretch the game out to that end game, these 2 heroes sit at the top of the heap. These are the heroes that you should have your eyes on, and you should know how your deck plays into. And I will also say this, I think that there are heroes that are good right now that because their matchups into these 2 heroes are bad, it's unfortunate, but I think that those heroes just don't have the spot that they perhaps deserve. They have a great matchup into everyone except these 2 heroes. And because of that, some heroes are not going to be at the top compared to other people's lists. So nevertheless, I think these 2 heroes are where the meta begins. Now the question is, what answers these heroes? And funnily enough, wouldn't you know it, but none other than Gravy Bones, after all was said and done, after all the nerfs, Gravy Bones is still a good answer to both of those heroes. It turns out that even though Gravy Bones lost a bunch of gold generation, the deck is still good. The deck still has the capacity to go very, very strong into these types of slower decks. Any deck that wants to slow the game down, Gravy Bones says, yes, I'm interested in doing that. Let's do it together. You can't deal with my board. And spoiler alert, Verdance and Florian, they really just can't deal with the board of Gravy Bones. But the other way that you can take, trying to target the Verdance and Florian players in a tournament is to just light them on fire. Now, you may think I'm talking about Kayo, and Kayo does indeed have a good positive matchup into both of those heroes, but the other way to think about it is pretty straightforward as well, and that's Syndra Drakai of Retribution. And I'm gonna prove all of this based on, of course, Talishar data, so if you're not into Talishar data, so be it, of course. But I do think Syndra is the aggro deck that everyone should start by looking at. That's the aggro starting point. You look at what Syndra can do, and you look at what Syndra does into these top 3 heroes that I've talked about, and it makes sense. Syndra has positive win rates, a very, very good time into Gravy Bones, and has positive win rates into Verdance and Florian. Yes, D-reacts are very good, and playing defensively can be fortuitous in certain matchups, but Syndra just says you're not gonna block me out, okay? So Syndra is the secondary step, the next step down answer to, of course, these Earth heroes. Now, what answers your Syndra and your Gravy Bones? And this is where some people are gonna look at me and say, I agree. Some people maybe not, but Kasai of the Golden Sand is a fantastic answer to both Syndra and Gravy Bones. Kasai is a wonderful answer to both of those. The problem with Kasai is that she very deeply struggles into both Florian and Verdance. The Earth heroes have very favorable matchups into Kasai. So Kasai is certainly an answer in some respects to Syndra, of course, and Gravy Bones, but has that big question mark looming large in those Earth hero matchups. Now, I don't think all is lost with her, and I do think that if you're perhaps building the deck in a specific way and playing towards maybe like Centauri Sellsword Generation, she can still do some stuff in those matchups, but I think her work is definitely cut out for her. Nevertheless, this is probably the most well-positioned Kasai has been since Heavy Hitters last year, at the beginning of last year, and I do think her stock has risen hugely, and it's partly because she answers Syndra and Gravy Bones, but it partly because she also answers the other hero that is on everybody's mind, the tip of the tongue, if you will, and that is Kayo, Armed and Dangerous. No, it's not Underhanded Cheat, but it is Armed and Dangerous. That is the hero that everyone's looking at and saying, it got so much from this set. There's so much that this deck can do now. I think the one point of contention against this being the best deck in format is that it does, on paper so far, have a less than positive matchup into Verdance and Florian. And because it got so much, it almost has just too many good options. It's like when you go to Baskin Robbins and you see 31 flavors and you hate yourself because you can't get all 31 flavors. That's kind of where Kayo is at. Kayo has such good tools across the board that now you're almost like, well, what do I do? Do I put this blue 6 in or that blue 6? I'm just flush with cash. I have all the possibilities, all the options. That's the problem that I think early Kayo builds are going to run into. You have to be very specific about building him in a way that all works together, and trying to find what the most optimized version of that will be, I think will take a couple of weeks, of course. That being said, it's very possible that, we just throw something down tomorrow, or I guess today in Japan, and someone just like, over the next 2 days spikes the tournament with KO Armed and Dangerous, and everyone just goes with that, right? I mean, it could just be that as well. But I do think that with these heroes that I've talked about, and I do think I added 6, so top 5, forget that. I'm giving you one extra because that's the value you have here on the channel. With these top 6 heroes, you're looking at a really interesting meta. It's not a triangle meta so much, but you could almost look at it like a tiered meta, where you start with the Earth heroes, you answer those Earth heroes, and then you look for the answer for those answers, right? So I feel like there is some play there, and I think KO is sort of the wild card in all of that, who could just rise to the top if he has the capacity to get around the defenses of both Verdance and Florian. But how do I know all this? Is this just all conjecture? Let's talk about that. And this is the point where you have to take everything with the massive grain of salt that it comes with, because if we go over to Fab Blazing and we go to the Talishar results, and it takes those Talishar results and it calculates them over the past like 30 days or so, right, of everyone testing in Talishar with OpenCC and that sort of stuff, this is what you're looking at. Look at this, 11,540 games played on Verdance. Like, yes, I understand people are learning how to play Flesh and Blood and they're testing new things, and not all of it's going to stick, but when you have a sample size of 11,540 games, I think that we should put some amount of stock into that. So if you're looking at this going, I don't know how much we can actually read into this, I think it's worth at least looking at, right? And if we sort, of course, by overall win percentages, Verdance and Florian sit atop the heap. And in my own experimenting with decks and playing just an absolute ton of Kasai, I would reflect that these two decks are the most dangerous of the bunch right now. Verdance and Florian are quite potent, quite powerful, and you can see that with, of course, their top win rates and the amount of games that are actually played on them to merit the top win rates, which is kind of crazy. Arachne Marionette is not one that I've mentioned, and here's the reason why. Because it has just a barely ahead win rate versus Syndra, Drakrai of Retribution, thanks to the disruption that it has available to it, but it does not do very well into the top 2 decks. Okay, so because of that, it's a deck that I understand its strengths currently, and it did take a step back thanks to the bans, but I would not be fearing it as much as I would something like a Verdance or a Florian. And alongside of that, Syndra is also one that I'm looking at. It is one that I mentioned being at the top. And do keep in mind that a good Kasai player, I think this matchup, Kasai versus Syndra, is fairly Kasai favored, especially if you're playing a version of Kasai that has any amount of tech for that matchup. I think Kasai is one of those decks that you actually should bring if you're looking to see more Syndras, if you're looking to see more Gravy Bones, if you're looking to see more of the field, because once you get past those first 2 Earth heroes, the rest of the matchups are pretty close. Minus your like Acilio and your Kano matchup. So Wizard's always been a struggle for Kasai because reds and yellows. And so those 2 are tough. Everything else feels pretty okay. Oh, and I should mention Fang. Fang has always been the bugaboo. Is that the right term? The bugaboo? I don't know. Fang's the Baba Yaga? No. I don't know. We'll go with one of those. Pick one. That's the one that we go with. That's always been a terrible matchup for Kasai because Fang just does exactly the same thing, but better, which kind of sucks. It's like that meme, you know the one. Anyway, the rest of her matchups against the field are just great. They're just great. And she has some key polarizing matchups. It's unfortunate, though, for her that many of her key polarizing matchups are these top 2 decks. But she's good into the other decks that could be rising to the top as well. So she is one that I do think you should keep your eye out for. Perhaps the most underrated hero right now, and could do a lot. But she could also just fall off a cliff, which would make me feel sad. Nevertheless, I will be making a Kasai deck tech based on the version of the deck that I have been playing, and it is not necessarily the Draw Swords Kasai, because I do think that there's a little bit of a bait in that as well. The rest of this data, looking at it, you have to go kind of far down for Acilio, which is shocking to me because Acilio was one of those heroes that I really expected to be towards the top of the heap coming out of this, or I guess into this new meta. And yet he isn't doing as well on Talishar as I thought. And maybe some of that data involves, playing into some new heroes that have just way a ton of damage that can go really fast, like Kayo, for example. It could be that, and it could also just be that we continue as Acilio to struggle against other heroes that go really fast. You have to get pretty lucky, at least in my limited experience. I had to get pretty lucky playing into the Syndra matchup because if you don't, you just can't go as fast as them sometimes. So it could be a little splash of that. Nevertheless, Acilio not as represented or as well showing as I would have figured originally. And then Gravy Bones on Talishar has a negative win rate. And I think the biggest thing that you should think about, Gravy Bones is a great answer to the top 2 decks in the format. It looks like it's a pretty even toss-up so far off of this limited data. 886 games versus the new KO Armed and Dangerous. And we don't know how many of those are maybe the old KO stuff. Either way, Gravy Bones answers the top 2 decks and then has some serious questions into aggression in the form of Syndra and a more of a mid-range plan in the form of Kasai. So that is something to keep in mind as well. KO, Kasai, Gravy Bones all have a few asterisks next to them, in my opinion. And the 2 sort of windmill slam decks that I really see right now are Verdance and Florian. So if I am wrong, let me know. I want to hear from you because I could be off base. I follow this as closely as I can because this is the part that's most exciting for me. Watching a metagame shift and change and watching people pick up decks, try new things within that deck, and change matchup percentages. I don't know why, I just like that. So I try to bring that to you so that you can get passionate for it as well as me. So if that's something you're interested in, of course, make the number, go to the other number, and we'll see how it all plays out this weekend in Japan. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.